You are listening to 95.7 FM WELT, Fort Wayne, radioactive. The opinions and views expressed in this show are those of the hosts and guests only. They do not represent those of FreeThought Fort Wayne, WELT, or any other organization. Welcome to the Hoosier Humanist Hour, where we explore science, religion, culture, ethics, and community from the humanist perspective. Join us as we discuss those topics and more, free from the ideologies of religion and superstition.
Good evening, and you're listening to the Hoosier Humanist Hour. The Hoosier Humanist Hour is a show dedicated to discussions about all things humanism. But really, we'll talk about just about anything, so long as we can actually discuss it from the humanist perspective. My name's Caleb. I'm joined today by V and Andrew, and if we're really lucky, we might get Chris today as well. He's having some technical difficulties, but hopefully he'll be stopped in sooner than later. Today's topic is conspiracy theories, and everybody loves, or at least it seems, everybody loves a good conspiracy theory. Matt Dillahunty sums up the persistence and perpetuation of conspiracy theories quite nicely, in my opinion. He's often quoted as saying that, people prefer a conspiracy theory to no theory at all. And, this holds true for pretty much everybody, and for good reason. People don't like not knowing, so they'll put something in its place that seems to fit, that feels right, and it's convincing enough. But in order to be a conspiracy theory, I think let's start there. What does it take to be a conspiracy theory? Let's go ahead and define at least what I'm talking about today. To me, a conspiracy theory is a belief that a particular event or plot was orchestrated by a covert group or organization. I don't really want to put in individuals in here, like conspiracy to commit murder type things. I kind of want to discuss the broader conspiracy theories that seem to apply globally or nationally. But the idea is that important events or even social trends are the product of secret plots that remain largely unknown to the general public. And it's that I really want to focus on. One of the things, that I really want to focus on here is the fact that these alleged theories about how XYZ occurred, in order for these to sound convincing or to be convincing, it has to be the case that it's largely unknown. And thus, it almost feels like kind of a secret, if you will. Like it almost feels like, that's good enough for me. It almost feels like you're holding on to a secret, that somebody told you something that you weren't supposed to know. I kind of want to explain some things that aren't conspiracy theories, at least not what I'm talking about. So UFOs themselves aren't the conspiracy. It's the cover-up that is. Those are the sorts of things that I'm hoping to discuss on today's show and really show how proper skepticism and critical thinking, when applied, just throws all these in the dirt and they just get plowed over and we move on. This is one of the reasons why almost everybody that I associate with aren't 9/11 truthers, aren't people that believe in the Halo Project. They're not Holocaust deniers. These aren't people who deny the moon landing. Although I've come across a handful of them, it's kind of inevitable. By and large, you're going to find that people who are properly skeptical, even especially those that consider them skeptics, just simply don't believe this stuff, and for good, valid reasons. There is a good, valid reason why the vast majority of the public don't believe in these theories and, quote, remain largely unknown to the general public. So, like I said, there's just 1,000 different types of conspiracy theories that we could discuss. But I really want to focus on what I think is kind of the mother of all conspiracy theories, namely the Illuminati. We can kind of brush on the Freemasons. Freemasons are still alive and kicking today, but everybody knows that they're not the organization that they're perceived or had been perceived to be over recent centuries.
Caleb, before we go into the specifics, I just wanted to add one slight caveat to what you just explained. It's all true, but what distinguishes a conspiracy theory from just some unlikely explanation is there is a well-founded explanation for most of these events. There's a mundane explanation that is widely known and accepted, but it's again, there's that secret explanation that is known to a few people, and usually those few that know this thing will claim that they're oppressed, that they're scared for their life, that you know the truth of what they're saying is actively being hidden by all these different groups. So you know uh, I think the only thing that I just wanted to add was there's a mundane explanation.
Well, no, that actually, I'm really glad that you added that, because I did kind of feel like I was missing something, but I just couldn't quite put my finger on it. I even looked up definitions of conspiracy theories, and I don't recall seeing anything like that. But that's an excellent caveat. I'm glad that you put that in there, because
Yeah.
that is a common thread to what I'm talking about. So thank you for articulating that. And speaking of articulation, I'm going to kind of tangent myself just a little bit. We'll get back on track here in a moment, but one of the things that come up a lot in the conspiracy theory realm in general, just like any other realm, is a common sort of language. So you'll find people who are big government conspiracy theorists tend to use language like the establishment or Big Brother, and you'll often see terms popping up left and right, such as the New World Order.
Right.
Right,
Deep
yeah,
state.
yes, yeah, that was a good one. Yeah, I forgot all about that one. Yeah, and a lot of this, the government conspiracy theories, the 9/11 truthers, the alien conspiracy cover up conspiracy theory, like the government has a cover up for their aliens. But you don't necessarily have to be a particular type of person, other than the type of person who's probably a little bit paranoid, to believe these sorts of things. Like Joe Blows can believe that stuff, but these sorts of instances are almost always compounded with a religious connotation. The New World Order, these sorts of terms are found heavily in the Freemasonry conspiracy theories, the Illuminati conspiracy theories. I mean, you see a resurgence of this sort of language when things like the Da Vinci Code came back around. Before that, we even had the Satanic Panic of the 80s. We can discuss that for a little bit later on. But really, the fuel that seems to perpetuate these flames, by and large, seems to be a religious core. Those who are the craziest, kookiest conspiracy theorists out there tend to have very strong religious beliefs, and for good reason, because these conspiracy beliefs stem from their religious beliefs, and that's why you see a lot of the similar language, like this New World Order stuff. It really comes from I'm not going to get too fancy. The people who really try to study the end of the world, Armageddon.
Oh,
And
sure, yeah. There's definitely correlation there.
yeah. So one of the reasons why I initially wanted to talk about the Illuminati is because almost every major conspiracy theory that exists, in fact, I'll go so far as to say pretty much every conspiracy theory that you've probably ever heard of worth remembering, in some way, probably and most likely stems to the Illuminati. These people have been blamed for everything. Something goes wrong, chances are you can find somebody out there that's going to make a connection to the Illuminati. They've got several allegations against them. I mean, primarily it's believed that they want to control the world. They want to influence governments, all of them, and people, all of them, in order to create a new world order under a single government with a single ideology. There's allegations that they're infecting Hollywood, they're infecting politicians, they're infecting a popular media, all sorts of things, to create an environment with as many divisive pods or groups of people as possible, and create tension between those groups. This is their overall plan. So this is why people who believe these sorts of things, the followers of these Illuminati theories, that is to say, are usually wingnuts. They're mostly religious paranoid types. But as I mentioned, paranoid types generally, can also believe this sort of stuff. But I kind of want to move in a slightly different direction here, because I think that this is like the fourth time I've mentioned paranoid thinking. So I do want to also mention that if it's not already a given, mental illness can easily play a role in this sort of thinking. If you find that somebody is way too paranoid about a particular thing, it's very likely that they actually do have some sort of mental illness. I mean, PTSD, for example, can generate paranoia in people, and that paranoia can lead to people believing that Big Brother's out to get them, for example, or their enemy, whoever that enemy happens to be. So, again, with a lot of these conspiracies, the extremely kooky ones, I'm gonna stereotype. I can't say this is fact, but I'm guessing that the extremely, really kooky ones, I'm guessing at least a decent portion of those people have some sort of paranoid, schizo type of personality. Not that they're schizophrenics, but just schizotype. It's just that general type of thing. There are also other types of personalities that are susceptible to this. I mean, we call them sheeple, right? These are people who are just kind of laissez-faire, easygoing, don't really care too much about what goes on around them. They find things interesting and latch onto those things that they're gullible as well. Okay, so again, I right here, gullibility. Let's kind of paradigm this, because this is really the essence of conspiracy theories. Right?
Well,
This is where.
Let me just throw something in there. Oftentimes, with some of these conspiracy theories, there is a grain of truth to them. There is some little truth to them, and somehow that gets just completely blown out of proportion and takes over this entire theory.
Yes,
So
exactly.
there is an
This is a
element of
great.
that.
Yeah, so this is a great opportunity to really emphasize the importance and value of skepticism and critical thinking. So if you have a bit of, quote, I'm not going to use the word evidence, I'm going to say data. Let's say you have some data that in some kind of ish way can be construed to be evidence for a particular theory of yours. Let's say, I got a good one. Let's use a good one. Roswell. The photos taken of the man who was standing next to the tinfoil and sticks. That photo was taken, and people have been using that photo for decades now as proof that aliens crashed in Roswell. That is not, and I'll let you go ahead, and I've been rambling on for a while. Why don't you go ahead and explain to the audience, V, if you would, why we should not just latch onto that belief and come to those conclusions.
Well, I mean, we certainly know that something happened in Roswell, right? So we know that something crashed. It's just a matter of how do we explain it. And as soon as who can respond to these kind of events, an airplane crash, a balloon crash, whatever. Well, it's some government agency that launched that balloon, and they may ask the army to go and retrieve it for them because they have the trucks, they have the manpower. NASA can't really, doesn't really have the vehicles to go and retrieve this weather balloon from the middle of wherever it landed. So you see a weird looking effect. You see, military vehicles potentially in the middle of the night. And there's a little grain of truth, and you already have this preconceived notion of aliens exist, aliens are visiting Earth, and it all starts to feed in on itself. One thing that I wanted to mention, a few episodes ago, well, it's been quite a few now, we talked about, biases and cognitive biases. I think there's two in particular that really play a role in conspiracy theories, and that's confirmation bias, where, you get a piece of information that, and if it reinforces a belief you have, you tend to place more value on that piece of information. So that's how these things feed on themselves. And with the Illuminati, the Freemasons, and I really think we can just put the Illuminati with the Freemasons together. Pretty much anything has been said about the Illuminati has been said about the Freemasons and all these other groups, the Bilderbergs, and all these other groups that supposedly rule the world. And they're usually somehow linked to Jews as well for whatever reason. But the bias there is what's called the self-serving bias, where your successes are due to your, personal achievements, and your failure is due to outside forces. A student may say, "Oh, I got an A on the exam. Oh, but he gave me an F." It's that kind of thinking. Your success is because of you, your failure is external circumstances, and the Illuminati are just pushing you and not allowing you to, expand your business, achieve whatever you want to achieve in the world. And, they're um, doing everything to promote the U.S. interests and suppress the third world, or, all kinds of, spins you can put on these things. So that's how these things grow.
Yeah, and I, you know what? I'm glad that you brought that up. It's later on in this episode. I don't want to talk about it right now because I really kind of want to end on this note if we can. But, excuse me. In other words, I promise we'll get to this. But Michael Shermer has written a book titled "Why Smart People Believe Stupid Things," and he's done all sorts of lectures and seminars on this particular topic. And that is definitely one of the things that he brought up. And we will most definitely be talking about that. That and also the there's in his mind he has a theory. I kind of agree with this. We've talked about this many times on this show about an evolutionary reason why this would exist. This tendency to believe conspiracy theories, and it kind of has everything to do with heuristics and in our evolutionary development. But before we get to that, yes, let's get back on track. Let's get back to the Illuminati. I agree. And yeah, you just brought up the religious angle, and you were asking some questions about why it was about Jews. Well, again, this all has a very religious core to it, and Christendom ruled the world around the time when the Illuminati first came about in the 1770s. So what you find is that a lot of these claims about the Illuminati are associated with the Antichrist, with Armageddon, and with anti-Semitism. And in fact, almost every conspiracy theory in some way can be tied to anti-Semitism. All the good ones, except for the moon landing. I think I don't know if that one's in there. I'd have to think about it. But anyway, so they essentially what people are thinking is that they're laying the groundwork, the Illuminati, that is, for the advent of the Antichrist. Okay, so now we have to understand that the Freemasons did exist before the Illuminati for at least some time. But as you had just mentioned, it's basically the same thing. In fact, the Illuminati modeled their organization after the Freemasons, and it's even alleged that they penetrate its ranks.
By the way, in order to be a Freemason, you must be a religious person. You must believe in a God. Just throwing that out there.
Just to be initiated, yeah.
Yeah. And there's a lot of Freemasons. I mean, we've had Freemason presidents. I know a guy here in town that, well, he moved away, but he was a Freemason. He's a little bit older. There's tons of them all over the place.
Yeah,
my grandfather is a Freemason.
Ah, nice.
And my grandmother was involved with Eastern Star and Job's Daughters, and even I was part of the boys youth group D Malay for a time.
What is the D Malay? This one's new to me.
D Malay is it's basically the boys' side of the youth Freemasons. It's all part of it's all part of the Masonic family. There's Eastern Stars, the women's, Masons is the men's, Job's Daughters is the girls, and D Malay is the boys.
Okay.
And there's a couple other ones in there in the Masonic family as well, but yeah.
I did not realize they have children's groups. That is news to me.
Yeah.
Well, they're not even that shy anymore. I mean, the Freemasons are pretty open about their Freemasonry most of the time. In fact, I was just today on my way out of work. I was driving out of the parking lot, and the dude in front of me had a license plate that said Freemason.
Oh yeah, they've been changing it up for a century now.
Yeah,
as far as it's no longer a secret society. As far as they keep everything a secret, but
Yes. Well, and that right there, people will. Well, never mind. I don't want to get off on that tangent. But yeah, no, this definitely has Christian roots. As we, he was just talking about the Masonries. That's a Christian. Well, technically, it's a Christian organization, isn't it?
Yes and no. They descend from the Knights Templar, and which were, I think they were uh, commissioned by the Holy Church to do what they did, and then their descendant organizations, which include the Freemasons and all the Masonic families and that, they do require you technically to believe in a god.
Okay,
it's part of their it's part of their ritual, and from my experience, the ritual is just this thing you do at the beginning and end of a meeting. Everything in between is just a standard, business meeting.
Okay. Well, either way, the Illuminati is most definitely religious as well, and they even most Illuminati will try to validate their claims with scripture. Even what you're going to find is people who affiliate all these different conspiracies with the Illuminati. They're going to try to tie this in with scripture. So, for example, this one actually comes up a bit, and I was kind of excited when I found this because this is kind of interesting. It's Revelation 3:9. Behold, I, Jesus, make them of the synagogue of Satan, which say they are Jews, but are not, but do lie. Behold, I, Jesus, will make them come and worship before thy feet, and to know that I have loved thee. And this ties pretty much, if you are a conspiracy theorist, and this is the first time you've heard this verse, and you believe everything that we've talked about up to this point, I probably just blew your mind. Because in this one verse, we have here the Jews, which do tie into all of this. We'll get to that in a bit, but long story short, we're going to be talking about the Rothschild connection here. If you don't know what they are, just hang tight. And then we have the Satan, because we'll also get to this. The Freemasons are accused of trying to consolidate nihilists and atheists in order to create communist societies so that they'll go to war with the other half of the world. That's one of the allegations put on the Illuminati, that they helped this ball get rolling. And they use these sorts of lines of scripture as proof that all of this has been prophesied already. And you see this stuff come up all the time, especially with like 9/11 truthers. You see that a lot in those communities. And plus, and just in general, people who believe that 9/11 was an act of God. Like, there are a lot of people out there that truly believe that that was one of the events that's going to help kickstart Revelation, especially back in the day, although I believe those numbers are diminishing. So let's go ahead and discuss as briefly as possible. Let's talk about the foundation of the Illuminati, because this is going to kind of help tie everything up. We're going to connect some threads here. So Adam Weishaupt is actually the guy who founded the Illuminati. He did this in 1770. Weishaupt was a German-born philosopher, and he was a trained Jesuit professor of canon law. Okay, now he is a real person, the kernel of truth, who really did a lot of the things that we're going to probably talk about here in a minute, but very likely not the way that people think that they happened. Hence the conspiracy theories are all around him. And anyway, so it's believed, and I should just say this, it's known, I'm going to omit that. It's known that Adam actually rejected Christianity at some point in his life, and allegedly joined a Luciferian, which is a Satanist ideology, while still teaching at Gold State University. In 1770, the moneylenders who had recently launched the House of Rothschild actually retained him, Adam, to help organize and structure their plan for world domination. So this is how it all starts, guys. Right here. This is where it all begins. We have the Rothschild connection. And for those who don't know, the Rothschild family One second here. The Rothschild family originally, is a Jewish family. Okay, and they made their grand fortune by starting a banking enterprise in the 1760s. It didn't take very long, with the backing of all of the moneylenders at the time that they had at their disposal. They very quickly became the wealthiest family in the world. One of the wealthiest, probably the wealthiest family to have ever existed, in fact.
They probably still are as a family. They probably own the most wealth still even today.
Yeah, most definitely. And again,
Maybe not as individuals, but collectively, they probably own more than any other family.
Yeah, basically, if there's a banknote in existence, it's essentially an IOU to the Rothschilds.
is that
Nice.
Right?
Nice.
Wow. See, so it really kind of helps put it in perspective too, because this is a Jewish family, and we were discussing earlier. Ves, what were those figures? What percentage of the world's population is Jews, and why is this relevant?
Well, I was looking up. I mean, as you mentioned, somehow these conspiracy theories often lead to Jews, and according to a quick search that I found, there's only 15 million Jews in the world, which is 0.25% of the overall population. If you assume that the population is 6 billion, which it's more than that, so it's probably like a fifth of 1% that's Jews in the world, and yet they somehow manage to control the Illuminati, the Freemasons, and everybody else. That so they control all the wealth of the world, even though they were exterminated to the point of almost just completely going away just a few decades ago in World War II. But
Yeah, so there's a lot of animosity, always has been a lot. There's been an anti-Semitic itch at the core of pretty much every culture around the world, and this has most definitely affected the Jewish culture profoundly, obviously, because you just mentioned that they have one of the smallest populations on the planet. You control almost all of its wealth, and they also contribute to a huge portion. I think something like 30%, if not more, of the Nobel Prizes ever, which is amazing. That's absolutely amazing. Now, I'm not. I only bring that up as an aside. I honestly don't know if that's pertinent, but I just find that incredibly interesting in and of itself. But anyway, before I get too sidetracked, let's go ahead and get back here.
Oftentimes, another thing that kind of leads to these conspiracy theories is a lot of people will say when you try to figure out what's happening, you need to follow the money. And when you have just a few wealthy families, few wealthy Jewish families like the Rothschilds, there's other ones, it somehow seems to necessarily everything leading to them, and somehow they're in control of everything.
Well, yeah, that's an excellent point, though.
There is a grain of truth to that. When you control that much wealth, and that's been built over generations and generations. It wasn't built overnight. They didn't seize power yesterday. There was actually an interview with Warren Buffett a few years ago, and like after the interview, there was like a Q&A with a bunch of people in the audience, and somebody asked him, what should I be when I grow old, like it was a child, if I want to, do good in the world. And what he replied to, and it initially is a head scratcher, but makes a lot of sense when you think about it, is go become a banker. Because once you become a banker, you control a lot of wealth, and then you can invest that money to achieve whatever you want.
Mm-hmm.
There's also the famous, the JP Morgan said once that he doesn't care who's in control of government. He just wants to own the banks because that gives him more power than the government. And in a way, control of banks, of money, gives you a hell of a lot of control because you can determine what you finance, what you don't finance, who you give loans to, who you don't. And so you have a lot of power. But, this kind of centralized group of Illuminati, they get together and determine the future and are about to bring in the end of days because we're going to start a war with the Antichrist, and like all this stuff is completely unfounded. But there's again that little grain of truth. Because these people are wealthy, they command a lot of of what happens in day-to-day life. Maybe not policy, but when you control parts of the economy, it leads to those conspiracy theories almost naturally.
Yeah. Well, exactly. I honestly don't think I have anything to add to that, but I do see that connection when, again, we're tying threads here. This because you just excuse me, Andrew had just mentioned that pretty much every dollar is an IOU to the Rothschild family. So yeah, it's only natural that if you're following money, that money is the Rothschilds essentially. So it's you're gonna connect some dots there. It's an inevitability. But I'm just gonna go ahead. I'm gonna summarize my own personal feelings on this. I'm just convinced that the Illuminati. I want to get back to the Illuminati here. It's just basically just a club for powerful men who may or may not be pushing a very real agenda in their world, but I don't think their world consumes the entire world. I highly doubt that they are truly attempting to rule the world or lay the foundations for the freaking Antichrist. I think that that's just kind of absurd to think. Really, I can't imagine this, but there's so much that feeds into this sort of thinking. We've been talking about this a lot, and in the 80s, we really saw a huge resurgence of this sort of thinking, this religious conspiracy theory fueled panic called the Satanic Panic that really compounded the problem that we're facing today with the abundance of conspiracy theories. Now, don't get me wrong, there are always going to be conspiracy theories. Always. We're never going to live in a world where there aren't conspiracy theories. It's going to happen. But
I was just gonna say, and let's not equate all conspiracy theories. I mean, some conspiracy theories are either benign or they don't lead to much, and some conspiracy theories are very detrimental to society. And I think that's something it's important to mention as we're talking about these. Whether it's the Illuminati or any other conspiracy theories. The moon landing being faked, the denying of the Holocaust. The whole Pizzagate that we can maybe touch on too, or anti-vaxxers. I mean, they're not all made the same.
So do you think that if somebody, for example, was convinced that was a conspiracy theorist that believed that the moon landing didn't happen, do you think that if they were convinced that, oh, it did happen, are you saying that as one of these negative effects being lifted, this guy would suddenly have a more profound trust in the government, and this is a good thing?
I don't know if I would go that far, but it's just somebody believing that the moon landing didn't happen. Even if they try to spread that, it's fairly benign. I mean, it doesn't really change anybody's life. However, somebody that pushes, like Sandy Hook truthers that think that the Sandy Hook shooting didn't happen, or anti-vaxxers that claim that vaccines are government's way to control our reproductive systems and like all this stuff. Like, these are harmful. These are very harmful they're harmful, like the anti-vaxxers, to all of society. They're harmful because they convince people not to vaccinate their children, and then those children can get exposed to deadly disease and die. And to the Sandy Hook truthers, I mean, the families of these people suffered such a traumatic event where somebody came into a school and shot up and killed so many children and teachers, and to go out there and start to convince people and to talk that this never happened. I mean, it's almost as if their children didn't exist. I mean, that's harmful. That's psychologically harmful.
Yeah, well, let's talk about the Sandy Hook thing for a minute, because I have a hard time understanding how something like this could have gotten perpetuated to the extent that it had in the first place. Now, obviously, there has to be a relatively powerful force that fans these flames, and so this is where I think a good opportunity to bring up people who abuse the media, in my opinion, such as
Of course.
Alex Jones. Okay, this is one of those guys that really helps to fan these flames. That like people who believe that Sandy Hook might have been or knew. Excuse me. Let me rephrase that. People who know that Sandy Hook was a real tragedy may have actually listened to this show and been convinced that it was a complete hoax. Because I'll be kind of honest, I've listened to this guy sometimes. If you actually listen to him, he can sound pretty convincing, especially if well, I don't want to sound crude or demeaning, but I mean, especially if you're not a very intelligent person. I mean, he's a relatively intelligent guy. He's a very quick talker. He's an excellent salesman, and he's got an appealing aura, if you will, at least in my opinion. He seems fun to be around, and he's funny, he's exciting. Okay, so he gets people's attention. He's like the prime example of a conspiracy theorist too.
Yeah.
For
And
35 years, they've been growing babies and cows.
Yes.
love it.
One thing that I just wanted to sneak in there, it's not so much that somebody that's not intelligent would believe him, but somebody that just hasn't had the time to investigate the claims. 'Cause
Yes, that's an excellent point too.
he definitely sounds convincing. I mean, I've listened to some of his stuff. Like, if you're just sitting there and just just listening, and why would you make that up? Like, you have to ask yourself when you hear him talk about Sandy Hook, and you ask yourself, why would somebody make that up? At first, there's no good reason, so you would tend to believe the claim, because why would anybody make that up? But then you go and investigate the claim, you find out that the claim is not true, and now what do you say to that question? He's trying to manipulate people, he's trying to grab them, retain them as an audience. That somehow plays into his agenda. It must be.
Yeah, and
There,
even if you do look into the things that he was talking about, even if you do your research, again, he uses bits of data that are little snippets of truth.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, like
all
any
right.
other conspiracy theory. Yeah.
But we're talking about minutia here. We're talking about petty things left and right that he feels build a cumulative case to suggest that his hoax is a real hoax, that this is a real thing, that his conspiracy theory isn't a conspiracy theory, it's brute fact. And so, for example, I mean, he was saying that there are videos of the kids just going in circles in and out of the building while this was going on. He was saying, yeah, that a rescue chopper didn't arrive for 2 hours. Okay, he was saying that the media, on specific, the media got caught using blue screen in this production. He's saying that these people are obviously actors, or excuse me, at the very least, many of them are obviously actors. And he's just feeding it. He asserts it, and when he asserts it, it comes off kind of believable if you have no reason to distrust the man in the first place. I mean, like you were saying, why would somebody make that up? That's crazy.
Yeah.
But Alex Jones, although I want to use him as a paradigm of a conspiracy thinker type, he's also a bit of a con man, in my opinion. I don't necessarily think I have a case to prove that, but John Oliver did an excellent piece covering Alex Jones and really highlighted the fact that even though each of his shows is approximately 4 hours, he spends nearly a quarter of his show time pushing product. Like this is what the man does. He has like a $55 million net worth or something like this, but he claims that the vast majority of this money is just going right back in to feed this system. And as John Oliver pointed out clearly, that production is not $55 million worth of production. Neither is his product enterprise, which, okay. This guy has a whole line of just crap products left and right. Pseudoscientific nonsense and bull crap that doesn't work. But he's also just got, little crazy bumper stickers and things like that too. Like
One of the craziest things that he was pushing, in terms of products that he sells, that just kind of tells you how dishonest he can be in some cases, was it was some kind of nutritional product, and this certain nutrient was supposed to, be the next greatest thing that you should eat a lot of, and like it'll make you Superman, basically. I don't know exactly what the deal was. And he was listing it, and this ingredient, you can only find it in comets and like like he listed like these crazy things that you wouldn't eat, and then all of a sudden, like towards the end of it, he goes, and in blueberries. But like he continues, like he moves on past that. I don't know, like maybe he didn't want to like lie, or he didn't read something on his teleprompter correctly or something. But this ingredient is available in like blueberries. I think he sells you this supplement for like super expensive. He wants you to buy it, and it's just
Yeah.
completely
Well,
dishonest. Like it's not like blueberries are not hard to get.
see, this is one of those reasons why I don't know if you mentioned this on the show or only before the show when we briefly discussed this stuff, but you had mentioned that you think that Alex Jones very likely believes at least most of the stuff that he spouts. So that a lot of the conspiracy theories that he says, I'm not so convinced. Okay,
Well, he
I think that
claimed when he got sued, I think, by his wife. I think he was in a divorce or something, and his ex sued him, I think, for custody of the kids. I may be slightly wrong on the facts here, but I think he claimed in the lawsuit, like when he was defending himself, that he was just playing a part on his TV show or radio show. Like he wasn't really that crazy. So that was his claim in court.
hmm.
But I mean, to even
So-
sit there for 4 hours and spout this stuff, like to me, you have to believe it to at least to a certain extent. Like even if you think you're exaggerating slightly, like I think you may actually believe some of that stuff.
yeah,
Well,
I think.
feel
Oh,
sorry. I feel the same way about Donald Trump. That a lot of what he says is just so extraordinary. He has to believe most of it because there's no way he can keep up that act for that long.
Exactly.
well, thank you for joining us, Chris. This is an excellent time to reiterate the fact that you are listening to the Hoosier Humanist Hour. Today's topic, we're covering conspiracy theories. We've covered pretty much the Illuminati and what really fuels a lot of the conspiracy theories that are propagated and perpetuated around the world today. We were recently just talking about Alex Jones. And Chris is joining us. Thanks for popping in, man. Were you seriously trying this whole time to fix those problems, or did you just kind of give up, walk away?
Apparently my computer needed 20 minutes to sit there and update. Like literally, just update at the desktop. Okay, to where I couldn't even open any programs at the desktop. It just had to sit there for 20 minutes to do that. Yeah, unbelievable. That's why I'm upgrading the computer tomorrow, I think, when the parts come. So,
well, thanks for hanging in there, and thanks for joining us, man. I'm glad to have you. Well, back on topic here. So, Rex brought up a good point with Trump, because Alex Jones and Trump both make up a huge part of the media diet for many, if not most, Americans these days. I mean, it's you kind of, if you care, you should be up to date on what the president's doing and saying. Obviously, the same does not apply to Alex Jones. I don't waste any of my day listening to him, but I am forced to deal with people who have listened to him and do listen to him and do listen to Trump. Alex Jones, I believe it was, actually created this whole conspiracy theory around what was known as Pizzagate. Was that right?
I think somebody else created it, but he spread it.
Oh, okay. See, that's
I
the
think
thing.
the original posts originate from 4chan. They were
that was
digging
a
through the
4chan
Podesta
thing.
emails.
And see, even if it just hung around on 4chan, I don't think it would have blown up the way that it had if Alex Jones hadn't gotten his hands on it.
Yeah,
see,
definitely.
and this is kind of what I'm talking about. You get a couple of big names that have a huge following, and this stuff just blows up, and we all have to deal with it. The Pizzagate scandal involved the Batista brothers. Now, we only had a brief discussion about this before the show, and I'm not honestly too privy to much of this information. I never even really heard of the Pizzagate, but Andrew, you had mentioned that the Batista brothers were in affiliation with the Clinton campaign. Was that right?
Yeah, John Podesta was the campaign chairman, and his brother Tony Podesta, he's a well-known lobbyist.
Okay. Yeah, and when these people make these allegations that the Clinton family is running or was it the Clinton family? I shouldn't say that if it's not.
Yeah, it was the conspiracy theory was that John Podesta's emails got hacked, and those emails got published all over the internet. So somebody gathered up a few weird pictures. They gathered up a few emails, and they cleverly highlighted a few facts here and there and made up this crazy conspiracy theory that the Podesta brothers were running a pedophilia ring out of a pizzeria. And as a result of that, this guy walked in there with a semi-automatic rifle, and he shot up the place. Like he shot uh, multiple shots were actually fired inside that place, and like somebody could have really gotten hurt. Like that's really an example of a very harmful conspiracy theory that was perpetuated by some of these conspiracy theorists. And it's pretty disgusting. I mean, on what planet would these two famous people that are one of them is running the campaign of one of our president candidates would run a pedophilia ring out of the basement of a pizzeria called Comet Ping Pong? Are you kidding with me?
That name kills me. Comet Ping Pong.
Yeah, that's the name of the place. It's insane.
Yeah, that it's just it's so overt. It's covert.
Yeah.
It's
what they
stupid.
don't want you to know.
Okay, well, we're actually kind of running relatively low on time, and I want to.
Yeah, we only have a few minutes.
Yeah, I want to kind of circle back a bit and finish up this conversation about the Illuminati. So just kind of to sum up here, again, the Illuminati are alleged to be the proprietors of the one world order, or they're at least trying to create a one world order. They want to do this by dissolving all governments and religions, and this is supposed to be done by dividing the masses into ever increasing camps, like political camps, religious camps, economic camps, ethnic camps.
Divide and conquer.
Exactly. And so they want them to fight each other so that they'll kill each other off, and the survivors will be too weak to fight back against the one world order. And it's alleged that Adam Weishaupt, the founder, corralled some 2,000 plus members for this Illuminati, which is true. Again, kernels of truth there. He did corral 2,000 plus members for this organization, this little club. And these were all to be top men. We're talking the ones who could first and foremost be trusted to rule the world. Like if you're going to be the last one standing, we want the best of the best. So they were going after intelligent people, like philosophers, scientists, and they were also obviously going for the extremely wealthy people to help fund all of this. So again, these theories are really stemmed from little kernels of truth. Okay, I'm not exactly sure what these people actually did in their spare time, and nobody will probably ever know. I mean, but the fact that some of these events actually happened, and the allegations put forth, when you start connecting dots, which are just loosely affiliated with each other, they go kind of nowhere, but they all kind of lead back to this. It's really where it kind of.
Well, the problem with the connecting of all those dots is that they're being connected without a shred of evidence. Like they're just there. They kind of sort of seem to go together, and so you just put them together. But you can't do that without having the evidence. I mean, we can probably, given today's, prevalence of technology, we can probably track every Rothschild member or every member of the Illuminati. Like we can probably know 24/7, like where they are, just from their metadata and just from hacking and just from all this stuff. So, I mean, they can't really hide these days that much. They could have hidden stuff back in the day, but not so much today.
Yeah. Well, it's there's an impact here where people really tend to believe that many of the wars and conflicts that have occurred over the millennia or last few centuries, excuse me, they really do blame a lot of this on the Illuminati, on this really loose evidence. Let's use the colonial wars between Great Britain and France, for example, at the end of the 18th century. The idea was the Illuminati wanted to weaken these two great forces because they were too great. They were, especially Great Britain, as it was a great superpower. It was in the way, so they wanted to fight each other, divide and conquer. See, this is the thing with conspiracy theories. There's little bits of evidence here and there to suggest that, yeah, they actually did try to influence these two countries to go to war. In fact, in 1785, the Bavarian government outlawed the Illuminati, and the next year there were published documents which were alleged to be directly involved with the Illuminati that are used as proof of a conspiracy. Though you have to understand, even then, this documentation was largely ignored. People just didn't believe it, even then. So, it's these grandiose yet nebulous perceptions of the Illuminati that kind of make it so that these conspiracy theories abound, even if the slightest morsel of data is all that they have that could possibly be construed as a connection.
Well,
That's all they need.
Let me throw this out there. In addition to what you're saying, that's exactly true. But let's say you're a conspiracy theorist and you believe in 10 or 15 different conspiracy theories. Well, all you really need is just like one of those to be true, and every once in a while, like one of these conspiracy theories pans out. Like sometimes, there have been false flag operations. There have been things that the government has hidden from us. There have been, conspiracies by wealthy people. When like bankers were caught fixing the exchange rate between banks. The interest that banks charge each other, like they were manipulating that exchange rate to make more money. And so every once in a while, one of these conspiracy theories pans out, and that somehow gives credence to every other conspiracy theory that everybody believes. They'll just point to, hey, see, I told you that was true. Now you must believe all these other things that I'm true because that one was true.
Yeah,
related.
Yeah, and that's why a lot of these people could connect the dots and make it seem in their minds, in their world, as though every major event that's ever happened in some way was orchestrated by the Illuminati. I mean,
somehow some businessman trying to control money and governments and whatnot gives credence to faking the moon landing. I mean, it's completely ridiculous, but it's based on the same weak evidence. It's based on the same weak chain with the same weak links that are completely unproven. And again, why would they lie about this? Like somebody will come out and make some kind of crazy claim that the government is hiding the aliens in Wright-Patterson Air Force Base or like wherever the aliens are being hidden. And why would they lie about that? Somebody's risking their life, and so yeah, it's just lack of evidence. Very weak.
So I mean, let's just. I want to take an outrageous example of what we're talking about and how people connect these dots in weird ways. So it's believed by many that in the early 20th century, the Illuminati wanted to consolidate all of the nihilists and atheists in order to create communism and fascism.
Right.
And lo and behold, we actually did and do have communism and fascism. It did come about, and largely in atheistic societies and manner. But it's kind of beside the point. Well, that's a argument for another day. But the point here being is that, as far as I'm concerned, to the best of my knowledge, communism came about through the bastardization of Marxism and the state of the middle class.
Karl Marx died in 1883, and it was like the communist society in Eastern Europe didn't come about until much after he was dead.
Yeah,
so the foundations were laid out decades before any of those things happened.
Yeah, see, these are the things that I think are truly contributing factors. And I mentioned earlier, if you want to believe these conspiracy theories, that this was not just an organic happenstance of our history, but it was actually an orchestrated event, that these people wanted to create communism so that these things would come to fruition. This is just an obvious, clear violation of Occam's razor. You have to believe all this extra stuff that you have no evidence for, and make just tons of wild leaps of faith and come to these crazy conclusions. So really, up to this point, in order to believe everything, one really has to write off inconvenient facts or events as facades that were intentionally decide to misdirect us.
And those events and circumstances are well founded. There's good explanations, and you're dismissing them for something that's much more weakly justified. Like that's the signature of a conspiracy theory.
Yeah, and this goes on and on, but I really want to touch, because I kind of want to step away from the Illuminati in our last couple of minutes here, and I said in the beginning, and I've kind of forgotten to keep up with this throughout the show, but I really want to put an emphasis on the importance of skepticism and critical thinking, and how and why people should apply them if and when they believe pretty much anything. Honestly, you should be applying proper skepticism and critical thinking to all of your beliefs. And if you find that something that you believe was in fact nothing more than a conspiracy theory and utter nonsense, throw it away. Like yesterday's newspaper, you do not need it. But before we touch on Michael Shermer, I just wanted to say that you're listening to the Hoosier Humanist Hour. Today's episode, we're discussing conspiracy theories and how the proper application of skepticism is something lacking in today's generation, probably throughout history. But it's one of the things that helps the lack of proper skepticism definitely contributes to conspiracy theories. I wanted to end this episode, if I could, with Michael Shermer is the chief editor of Skeptic Magazine, and he's been dealing with conspiracy theories for the past 2 decades, I think. And he wrote a book, called Why Smart People Believe Stupid Things. And he's really run with this. He's done lectures and seminars. He's even done a TED Talk or 2 on the subject. And it's pretty self-explanatory, but it's obviously a book about exactly what we're talking about. How could people possibly believe a lot of this nonsense? And he really starts with some advice. And the advice is simply this. When you hear a claim, first start by researching what those who are most vehemently opposed to the claim are saying, and start there. So if you believe something and you're not entirely sure if it's legit, or even if you just want to test it, which you should always test your beliefs, go to where the most vehemently opposed and intelligent sources are, and start there, and see if you can find rebuttals and evidence to contradict it. And if not, oh well, you got to drop it and move on. He also says, we have to check ourselves for biases, and one ways that we can help to check for these biases is to simply talk to the opposition, not merely have these conversations in your head, not just assume what the other person's thinking, to actually go and have the conversation and see what they say. It's really important. And then he kind of gets into the mechanics behind it. It's kind of a knee-jerk reaction almost to believe a claim when presented with one. When somebody tells you something, especially somebody that you know and are pretty comfortable with, our first initial instinct is to believe it. All right, if you trust somebody enough to hang out with them, and you're not worried that they're going to rob you or whatever, generally, if somebody like this comes up to you and says something, it can basically be trusted for the most part. On average, we experience this every day. All right, well, I'm sorry, guys. I'm going to actually have to end it there. We are out of time. I want to thank you guys for joining me, especially you, Chris, for the extra effort and having to join late. And Andrew, I want to thank you for participating more than usual today. It was great to hear your voice. I'm sure the fans appreciate it. This has been
great.
This has been the Hoosier Humanist Hour. Thank you for listening, guys, and we'll see you next time.
That is all the time we have for you this week. This has been the Hoosier Humanist Hour. Be sure to check out FreeThought Fort Wayne on Facebook and on Meetup.com. Thank you for listening, and we hope your days are filled with logic, reasoning, and the eternal quest for knowledge.